The Argonaut was never supposed to return. Over 5 decades had passed since the ship disappeared into the dark void beyond the Veil Nebula, a place where strange energy storms made even the boldest captains turn back. She had become a ghost story, a warning about how far humans could push and how quickly the universe could push back. So when Command picked up a distress signal from Sector 9 Gamma, they were shocked. It seemed impossible, maybe even a trap, but they sent the scout ship Lancer anyway. Commander Darrow stepped onto the abandoned bridge of the Argonaut and felt reality crash into him. The ship was real. Her hull gleamed like new, but something was wrong. Strange patterns of energy moved across her surface, and unfamiliar metals wove through the old titanium frame like muscle and bone. Her weapons looked nothing like Earth design anymore, sleek and organic, almost alive. When they opened the airlock, they found the crew. Not dead, but frozen in time. Their skin glowed soft blue, and their eyes twitched as if trapped in endless dreams. Darrow radioed back to base, but something blocked the signal every time they moved away from the ship. Something the vessel carried. Something dark. They towed the Argonaut to orbit above the moon and locked it down. Mistake number 1 was boarding her. Mistake number 2 would come next. Dr. Kyle Wren arrived to study the ship. He was young, smart, and brave enough to think he could understand a vessel that had vanished before he was born. His first reports were careful. Unknown metals in the hull. Elements not found anywhere on the periodic table. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Then he wrote the line that changed everything. This ship has been modified by something not from Earth. Within hours, Black Badge operatives filled the moon base. Intelligence agents, science teams, and the High Chancellor's Shadow Division arrived with cold eyes and no names. They sealed the ship, locked the crew in stasis, and classified everything. But Kyle couldn't let it go. One night, he slipped past the guards and into the ship's depths. Doors that military cutters couldn't breach opened for him. Lights flickered on as if the ship remembered him. Deep inside, in a chamber that shouldn't exist, he found it. The core, it wasn't made. It had grown. A black sphere the size of a human heart, pulsing with power, surrounded by symbols that burned themselves into his mind when he looked too long. And then it spoke to him. Not with words, but with pure thought and feeling. It showed him a war beyond Earth's knowledge. Ancient beings, vast and cruel, were terrified of what humans might become. They had tried to erase the Argonaut by tearing it from time itself, but failed. The ship adapted. It evolved. It absorbed technology from a future that hadn't happened yet. Now it was back. The message was clear. Prepare yourselves. They know you exist and they are coming. Kyle stumbled backward, gasping. His mind flooded with visions. Alien ships shaped like blades in storms, stars collapsing into darkness, screams he could hear without sound. The core pulsed. A quiet whisper of truth that shattered his world. He didn't remember leaving. One moment he stared at the sphere. The next he stood in the medical bay with security alarms screaming around him. A nurse screamed when she saw him. Guards burst through, weapons drawn, ordering him down. Kyle just sat on the bed, confused and lost. "I didn't touch anything," he said. "The ship let me in." They dragged him away and locked him up. For hours, different people asked the same questions. "What did you see? Who helped you? Did the crew speak to you?" Kyle told them nothing. How could he? Who would believe that a half-alive spaceship showed him the future? Alone in his cell, Kyle replayed the visions. The core hadn't just shown him a threat. It had shown him humanity's strength. Humans weren't prey. They were a problem. Chaotic, stubborn, creative humans broke every rule and bent impossible things into possibility. The Argonaut proved it. She had survived and learned. Outside his cell, things fell apart fast. Security cameras glitched. Lights dimmed. Doors sealed themselves. 2 engineers vanished. One of the frozen crew opened his eyes for 6 seconds before falling back into sleep. No one could explain any of it. Whispers spread through the base like fire. Soldiers heard voices in empty corridors. Scientists found strange gravity shifts. Some swore the walls breathed. Many began dreaming of what Kyle had seen. The war, the invaders. Whole planets erased. One man clawed out his own eyes, sobbing that he didn't want to see the end again. The base went into lockdown. Kyle barely slept. Every night the core called to him. Sometimes soft, sometimes like thunder in his chest. It wasn't angry. It was scared. And it had chosen him. On the 3rd night, Kyle woke to vibration under his bed. The walls glowed blue. A voice that wasn't quite human filled his head. "You are the bridge. Time is breaking. We must start now." He stood on shaking legs. His cell door slid open with a hiss. No alarms, no guards. The corridor was empty and dark. The ship had come for him. Kyle walked barefoot through halls where no cameras watched and no system sent warnings. The base held its breath. He didn't think about where he was going. He just knew. The path led through tunnels and forgotten halls beneath the base, places most workers didn't know existed. Soon he stood in the main docking bay facing the Argonaut again. It loomed like a sleeping giant. He placed his hand on the outer hull. The metal was warm and alive. A panel slid open beneath his palm, revealing a passage no human crew had ever used. He climbed inside. The corridor was alien now. Organic fibers pulsed along the walls. Old Federation design had been overwritten by something far older. He walked through something half-ship, half-living creature. The air buzzed with energy and the smell of ozone. He could feel it watching, not judging, not hostile, but curious and waiting. It led him back to the core chamber. The sphere was larger now. Its black surface rippled like oil on water. The symbols no longer hurt his eyes. They welcomed him. He stepped closer and the core rose slightly from its holder, humming a low sound that felt like thunder inside his bones. Then the world disappeared. He stood on a battlefield. Real. Thousands of miles of burned ground stretched under a sky filled with fire. Two armies clashed above. One cold and sharp like glass blades shaped into ships. The other wild, biological, constantly shifting. Neither looked human. But in the middle, Kyle saw them. People. Humans. Broken and bleeding, but still fighting. Their weapons were crude, their armor damaged, their eyes burning with that human refusal to go down without a fight. They were outnumbered and outgunned, yet they were winning. He saw a man take down a giant using a modified mining tool. He saw a woman hijack an alien craft mid-flight and crash it into a battleship with laughter in her scream. He saw a child, barely 12, wielding impossible technology, tearing open holes in space with just a thought and a stolen gauntlet. The ancient beings were afraid, because humans weren't supposed to survive, let alone become stronger. The vision shifted. Kyle saw Earth. A future Earth half covered in machines and war, half alive with impossible hybrid technology. Cities floated. Oceans became weapons. The planet had become something new and dangerous. At its heart, the Argonaut orbited silently like a seed of the future. Kyle dropped to his knees as the vision ended, gasping. The core pulsed gently, quieter now. He understood. The Argonaut hadn't just been changed by enemies. It had swallowed the war itself. Time didn't pass the same for it. While Earth waited 53 years, the ship lived through centuries of future conflict. It watched humans rise, fall, and rise again. It became a vessel of knowledge, a ship that carried tomorrow's secrets, and now it brought that future home, not to warn Earth, but to prepare it. Kyle stood slowly. "I understand now," he whispered. "They're not coming to take over. They're coming to stop what we're about to become." The core shifted color, something between agreement and sadness. He turned. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. A figure emerged from shadow. Commander Darrow, weapon drawn, eyes hard. "You weren't supposed to be here," Darrow said coldly. "But I guess that ship wants you more than it wants us." Kyle didn't flinch. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand fine," Darrow cut him off, raising the gun. "You're the key, and we're sealing this vault before anyone turns it." Kyle stared at the barrel of Darrow's plasma pistol, the core behind him throwing long shadows across the floor. He didn't move. He could see it in Darrow's face. This wasn't a threat. This was final. The commander wasn't angry or scared. He was calm. That made him more dangerous than any alien enemy. "You don't have to do this," Kyle said quietly. Darrow's jaw tightened. "You think I want to? I've read the logs. I've seen the reports. You know what's coming. You know what that thing really is. You just don't care." Kyle stepped forward slowly. "I care, that's why I'm here. That ship didn't just survive. It learned. It changed. It adapted to things beyond our wildest thoughts. Now it's trying to give us the same chance." Darrow didn't lower the weapon. "Yeah, a chance to what? To become monsters. You saw what Earth becomes. That wasn't salvation. That was extinction wearing armor. They won't just come for us. They'll wipe our entire species off the map to make sure it never happens. You think we deserve to win just because we're clever? We don't." His voice got tight. "That ship is a loaded gun pointed at everything. Kyle felt the core pulse behind him like it was answering Darrow's fear. Then maybe it's time someone taught the galaxy that humanity doesn't get wiped out just because it's dangerous. The shot rang out before Kyle could finish, but it didn't hit him. The plasma bolt froze in midair, flickering like a spark in a cage. It hung between them for a heartbeat and then fell apart into particles of blue light. Darrow stared, eyes wide. The core had stopped the shot. Kyle hadn't even turned around. He didn't need to. The core was protecting him now. It had chosen him. Darrow backed away, his voice shaking. No, no, no. This is wrong. You don't know what you're messing with. Kyle looked him straight in the eye. I do now. The core pulsed and everything changed. The ship shook violently. The floor groaned and twisted. The chamber split open in layers, revealing streams of light and data like rivers. The walls became transparent crystal, showing Luna base above in chaos. Lights flashed. Sirens wailed. Dozens of people lay unconscious across the station. Some screamed. Some cried. Some just stared at nothing. The ship was reaching them. The core wasn't trapped anymore. Its knowledge spilled into the base like a virus, choosing minds that could hear it not through words but through instinct and sight. Kyle could feel it. Humanity being awakened. He turned to Darrow, who clutched his head on one knee as the core's wave crashed over him. It's not trying to control us, Kyle said almost softly. It's showing us what we can become. The future's already here. We can either be ready or get destroyed. Darrow looked up, eyes red, jaw clenched. They'll come. You think you've seen war. You've seen nothing. The ones who did this to the Argonaut erased entire civilizations. You think humans scare them now? Wait until they see what you've let loose, Kyle nodded. I hope they do. Outside, orbiting the moon, defense satellites lit up on their own. Systems triggered by signals no one could trace. Inside the base, the freeze chambers holding the Argonaut's crew began to thaw one by one. Kyle saw it all in flashes. Engineers waking up screaming. The pilot smashing through the stasis glass. The captain's eyes glowing with the same alien light as the core. They weren't quite human anymore. But they weren't alien either. They were something new. Something evolved. Kyle's body burned with heat and light. Knowledge pouring in too fast to understand. But he knew one thing for sure. They weren't alone anymore. Earth was no longer a quiet little world in the corner of space. The Argonaut had returned as a warning. Kyle stumbled back through the shifting corridors of the ship. The core's glow burned into his skin. His fingertips burned with invisible power. His mind raced with visions of futures that hadn't happened yet. Something had changed inside him. Something forever. The ship had done more than share knowledge. It had rewritten him. Behind him, Darrow slumped against the wall, breathing hard. His resistance had broken into silence. Whatever the core showed him had shattered his iron will, left him hollow and afraid. Kyle didn't wait for him to recover. Outside the ship, Luna Base spiraled into chaos. Alarms shifted from local to full alert. Red lights filled every corridor. Security raced toward the docking bay while others collapsed mid-run, hit by the same mental wave that had taken half the station. The base's main computer went dark, replaced by a low rhythmic hum echoing from every speaker like a heartbeat. The Argonaut had synced with the station. Earth Command had noticed. The first attack came an hour later. A secret orbital defense platform named Thornvale Veil launched kinetic warheads directly at the moon base. No warning, no talking, just missiles. Someone high up decided that whatever was happening at the base was too dangerous. Better to destroy it than try to understand. But the missiles never landed. They stopped in space, frozen like insects in amber. The core's glow reached far beyond the station now. Touching anything mechanical, anything digital, it bent reality itself. The warheads floated, then slowly reversed, then fell apart atom by atom in a perfect shimmer. The Federation had fired first. The Argonaut just swatted it away. Down in the stasis wing, the thawed crew was fully awake. But they weren't scared. They were waiting. Captain Ryan stepped forward, tall and gaunt, with silver hair and eyes that glowed faintly. His uniform was still Federation issue, but now sleek and changed, laced with alien technology that moved like living threads. You must be Kyle Wren, he said calmly, his voice strange and resonant. Kyle nodded. I saw pieces of it. What happened to you? What did you become? Ryan smiled slightly. We didn't become anything. We just lived longer than expected, and the ship made sure we were ready for what's coming. What are we facing? Kyle asked. What's coming? Ryan's face went dark. They call themselves the Valari Ascendancy. You haven't heard of them because they don't leave survivors. When they learned humans had discovered subspace folding, that we could bend time to jump across space, they panicked. We were chaos. We broke rules that kept their control for 10,000 years. Kyle swallowed hard. And they tried to erase you. Ryan nodded. They pulled the Argonaut into a war that hadn't reached Earth yet. They gave us a front-row seat to humanity's future and its end. But the ship learned. She remembered. She brought us back. Not to just survive, but to win. Back on Earth, the High Chancellor shut down all public communication. No news, no statements. No one was told that the moon base had gone silent. But in the highest command centers, panic took over. 3 more ships tried to approach the Argonaut. All were rerouted mid-flight. Not by Earth technology, but by something far older. Something awake inside the ship's systems. An ancient defense system triggered by fear. The ship had become sovereign. Earth was no longer in control of its own fate. Kyle watched as Ryan and the crew connected with the core again. Their minds linked without words. Their movements matched perfectly. They were preparing for something. Charging systems Kyle didn't recognize. Awakening codes buried in alien symbols. He turned to Ryan. What's the plan? When do the Valari arrive? Ryan glanced at the empty space outside the window. They're already here. Kyle's heart jumped. Ryan brought up a star map on the control screen. Beyond Pluto, just past where Federation sensors could reach, space rippled unnaturally like fabric tearing. Dozens of points flashed in and out. Ships, weapons. Entire worlds turned into tools of war. The Valari weren't sending scouts. They were sending an extinction fleet days away. Ryan looked at Kyle. You're not just watching anymore. You're a carrier. The core chose you. Your mind is the bridge between human evolution and survival. You don't have a choice. Kyle stared out at the stars. For the first time, he didn't feel like a scientist. He felt like a weapon. Kyle didn't sleep anymore. Sleep belonged to a time when the galaxy made sense. He stood at the command deck of the Argonaut, staring through the transparent walls at the growing enemy fleet gathering beyond the moon's orbit. Earth hadn't seen the ship's return as a gift. They saw it as poison, a threat to their power. Now dozens of Federation warships formed a tight line, angled at the Argonaut like they were staring down a wild animal, and far beyond what Earth sensors could detect, the real enemy was almost here. Ryan appeared beside him, silent. They still think they can stop us, Kyle said quietly. Ryan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. They've been afraid of their own kind since the first time someone made fire, and used it for more than warmth. They built the Federation to keep order, but all they really wanted was to cage us. Kyle exhaled, running his hand down his face. They're going to fire again. They won't get the chance, Ryan said calmly. They're too slow. Down in the core chamber, the crew finished the final sequence. The Argonaut no longer looked like an Earth ship. Her walls had shifted, organic and smooth, like veins wrapped around a skeleton made of light. The air felt different, thicker, alive. Kyle could feel it in his bones. He wasn't just connected anymore. He was changing. The core had rewritten parts of his mind. He could sense energy fields. He could predict movement. He could hear thoughts if they were close. And somewhere deep inside, a new ability had taken root. The power to bend machines, to make them respond like animals to his will. He wasn't the only one changing. Across the base, more scientists who had been touched by the core's power reported similar changes. Not full merge like Kyle, but enough to blur the line between human and something new. The Argonaut was building an army quietly. At dawn, Earth Command gave its order. It wasn't broadcasted, but the Argonaut heard it anyway. A full attack. 55 kinetic warheads aimed not just at the ship, but at the moon base. A wipe. A containment dressed up in protocol. Kyle sensed it before anyone else. His body went stiff. His eyes rolled back. The core whispered, not in fear, but in focus. You must choose, Kyle Ren. He didn't hesitate. The warheads launched. Within seconds, the core pulsed once and reality bent. Time slowed. The weapons drifted through space like falling leaves. Then, without a sound, they came apart. Not exploded, unmade dust, memory, nothing. The Federation ships filled with alarms. Systems shorted out. Pilots screamed into dead communication. Weapons wouldn't lock. Engines died. Gravity twisted sideways for 3 full seconds. Long enough for every soldier to feel something wrong in their bones. Then silence. And the Argonaut sent a signal into the minds of every leader on Earth and its colonies. Not words or code, but a vision. It showed the future the Valari wanted. Cities burning, skies torn open, earth cracked like a dead moon. It showed humans begging for mercy that would never come. Then it showed something worse, victory, human victory, not clean, not righteous. Victory through change, through hybrid technology, through becoming the very things that frightened the Valari into genocide. Humans becoming more than human. In the middle of it all, Kyle Ren with eyes glowing like twin stars. The Federation fleet retreated from orbit. They weren't surrendering. They were stalling, trying to understand what they'd seen, trying to choose whether Earth should stand with Kyle or against him. Kyle turned to Ryan. They won't help us. No, Ryan said, but they'll try to steal what we're becoming. They'll try to use it until they break it. Kyle looked at the stars beyond. The Valari fleet had entered the solar system. Hundreds of ships folding into real space just beyond Saturn. The final wave. He could feel their presence already. Cold, precise, ancient, unimpressed by Earth, unimpressed by humans. They were coming to erase a problem before it spread. And Kyle was the one thing standing in their way. But he was no longer alone. The Argonaut was alive. The crew was awake. The core was ready. They came without sound. The Valari fleet unfolded around Saturn like black wings stretching across the void. Their ships weren't built. They were grown. Towering biomechanical structures with no visible engines, no heat, no signals. They drifted like corpses and struck like predators. One moment the system was quiet. The next Neptune was gone. Shattered into floating ice and debris. Not a warning. A message. The Federation scrambled what ships it could, but they were scattered, outdated, and lost. Their best vessels were built for orbital police work, not endless war. Kyle stood on the Argonaut's bridge, watching through the ship's senses. He didn't need sensors anymore. He felt the Valari like a storm pressing against his skull. Cold, clinical, ancient beyond time. They were here to cleanse. The Federation sent one last, desperate message. We don't support you. We don't stand with you. Do what you must, but don't bring this war to Earth. It was the cry of cowards. Kyle didn't answer. Ryan appeared beside him, pale light flickering in his eyes. They'll test us first. A probe wave. Standard Valari doctrine. They're looking for weakness. We don't have any, Kyle replied, his voice distant. His mind was half in the core, half outside time now. He had grown past fear, past limits. The core had woven through every part of him. His blood hummed with dark light. His thoughts bent probability like gravity. He was no longer just Kyle Ren. He was what came next. And the Valari knew it. The first attack came to the moon's orbit 20 minutes later. 7 ships, each the size of a small city, covered in dark plating. They released a swarm of creatures, half machine, half virus. They didn't fire weapons. They consumed structures bit by bit, atom by atom. The outer moon base was breached in seconds. Federation defenses crumbled almost instantly. But the Argonaut was ready. Kyle raised his hand. Not to a control panel. Not to speak. Just a gesture. The core answered with a low roar that shook every part of the ship. And then the Argonaut struck back. It didn't fire missiles. It rewrote reality. The core unleashed a wave that folded space in a ring around the ship. The Valari swarm was caught mid-attack. Then each creature froze, locked in a stutter of time. Then they shattered. Not exploded. Fragmented. They fell apart along lines of probability, broke into fragments of light and data, as if their very existence had been erased. Kyle didn't stop. With a thought, he reached into the moon base, pulling those who had been asleep, those whose minds had started to shift. Scientists, technicians, a few soldiers. They responded instantly, syncing with the ship. Some collapsed under the strain. Others rose as something new, a new kind of human. Kyle sent a single thought to them all. They think we're the virus. Let's prove them right. The second Valari wave came faster. This time they didn't test. They attacked. 50 ships descended from Saturn's shadow, weapons glowing with pure entropy. They unleashed beams that tore matter into nothing. Entire moons turned inside out. Federation cruisers vanished in a blink. But the Argonaut didn't flinch. Kyle was no longer inside it. He was it. He moved like thought. The ship bent around him like armor. Its systems obeyed his will. The core was no longer guiding him. It was listening to him. And Kyle did the one thing the Valari couldn't understand. He adapted in real time. He tore open a pocket of collapsed space behind one of the Valari ships, snapping it out of existence. He unleashed biomechanical creatures of his own, ones that had never existed before, formed from thought and the core's memory. He rewrote physics and the Valari fleet faltered. They weren't used to resistance. They weren't used to fear. But now, for the first time in eons, they hesitated. One Valari ship broke rank. It didn't fire, it spoke. Not with sound or words, but with a wave of emotion so sharp it nearly broke Kyle's mind. A single message buried in grief and fury. You are not meant to survive. You are not part of the design. Kyle answered with something cold and final. Then maybe the design was broken, and he tore it apart with just a thought. The war had begun. But for the first time in 100,000 years, the Valari weren't just fighting chaos. They were fighting humanity. And this time, humanity knew how to fight like them. The Valari didn't retreat. They couldn't. Their entire world was built on perfection, on control, on the erasing of anything that defied their ancient blueprint for the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just a threat. It was an insult. A glitch that had to be fixed. But Kyle wasn't a glitch. He was the answer. The Argonaut spun through the battlefield, a living spear of light and shadow. Its hull glowed with adaptive power, deflecting entropy beams and unraveling Valari constructs with perfect precision. The core pulsed at its heart, no longer just a power source, but a mind, a collective will woven from Kyle, the crew, and the countless futures the ship had witnessed. The solar system burned. Saturn's rings shattered into clouds of glittering debris. Titan's surface boiled under stray beams. Earth's skies glowed faintly red as shields strained against the fallout of a war humanity wasn't ready for. The Federation fleet, what little remained, hung back, watching in stunned silence. They'd become spectators in their own survival. Kyle didn't care. His awareness stretched across the battlefield, a web of instinct and thought. He saw every Valari ship, every movement, every flicker of their cold-ordered minds. They were fast. They were precise. But they were predictable. And humans were anything but. With a thought, Kyle unleashed a cascade of hybrid creatures, beings born from the core's memory and his own imagination. They weren't drones or weapons. They were ideas made real, swarms of fractal beasts that rewrote their own code mid-flight, adapting faster than the Valari could respond. They tore through the enemy fleet like a plague, burrowing into biomechanical hulls and turning them to ash from within. The Valari answered with raw power. A flagship larger than the moon unfolded its core weapon, a singularity lance, a beam of collapsed spacetime that could erase entire planets. It aimed directly at the Argonaut. Kyle felt it coming before it fired. Time slowed. The core whispered not in words, but in a flood of possibilities. He could dodge. He could counter. He could redirect the energy. Or he could end this, Kyle chose. He didn't move the Argonaut. He moved himself. His body dissolved into light, into data, into the raw essence of the core's power. He became the ship, the battlefield, the war itself. His mind stretched across the solar system, a burning line of defiance. The singularity lance fired, and Kyle caught it. Not with technology, not with force, with will. He held the beam in place, its black heart screaming against his grip. The Valari ship shuddered as it tried to push through. Kyle felt their shock, their panic, their ancient arrogance cracking like glass. You wanted to erase us, he said, his voice echoing through every Valari mind, every human soul, every piece of the battlefield. But we're not your mistake. We're your future. With a final pulse, he turned the lance back on its source. The flagship didn't explode, it ceased. A silent implosion swallowed it whole, leaving nothing but a ripple in space and a stunned Valari fleet. The tide turned. The Argonaut's crew, now fully linked, their bodies laced with alien technology and human will, took the fight to the enemy. Ryan led a boarding assault on a Valari dreadnought, tearing through defenses with weapons that shifted form mid-strike. The awakened scientist on the moon base unleashed makeshift arrays, bending gravity and time to trap Valari ships in loops they couldn't escape. And Earth watched. The Federation's leaders, hidden in bunkers, saw the impossible. A single ship, a handful of humans, a man who was no longer entirely human, holding back the end of everything. But victory wasn't clean. The Argonaut was wounded. Its hull bled energy. Its systems frayed under the strain of a war it was never meant to fight alone. The crew was failing, some burned out from the core's power, their minds unable to carry the weight of centuries poured into seconds, and Kyle was fading. He could feel it, The core had given him everything: power, knowledge, purpose, but it was burning through him. His humanity was a dying flame, consumed by the godlike force he'd become. He had one last choice. With the Valari fleet in chaos, Kyle turned his focus inward to the core, to the ship, to the future it carried. "Ryan," he said, his voice a whisper across the ship's network. "You know what comes next." Ryan, bloodied and half-broken, nodded from the dreadnought's ruins. "We'll carry it. We'll teach them." Kyle smiled, though no one could see it. He reached into the core one final time and gave it everything. His memories, his fears, his hope, his humanity. The core took it all, transforming it into a signal, a beacon that would carry the Argonaut's truth to every corner of the galaxy. A message for humanity, not just to survive but to evolve, to become something the Valari could never predict. The Argonaut flared brighter than a star. The remaining Valari ships froze, then fled, folding into the void as their purpose shattered. And Kyle Ren was gone. When the light faded, the Argonaut hung silent in the moon's orbit. The war was over. The Valari were gone for now. The Federation emerged from its bunkers, shaken, humbled, forced to face a new truth. The Argonaut's crew, led by Ryan, stepped onto Earth. Not as heroes, but as harbingers. They carried the core's knowledge, ready to share it with a species that would never be the same. The moon base was rebuilt. The Argonaut was studied as a teacher, not a weapon. And across the colonies, whispers spread of a man who had become a myth, a scientist who had faced gods and rewritten the stars. They called him the First, not because he was the strongest, but because he was the spark. The Valari would return one day. Everyone knew it. But when they did, humanity wouldn't just fight back. It would burn brighter than anyone could ever imagine. Years later, a child on a distant colony world found a fragment of alien metal buried in soil. It hummed faintly, glowing blue under her touch. She didn't know what it was, but when she held it, she dreamed. She dreamed of a ship that sailed through time, of a war that wasn't the end, but the beginning, and of a voice soft and certain, whispering, "You are enough."